Hello, Garland Nixon here. It's Monday morning. Got a few things, one or two things going on in this world. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and it's Monday morning. One or two things going on. Kind of weird. My live count shows 0. That like never happens, but who knows? Who knows? Let me see what's going on. Am I on YouTube? Oh, there we go. 13. The unluckiest number of all, right? 13. Yes, 13 is unlucky if you believe it, and if you don't, it's not. How about that? uh Why is it unlucky? Isn't it something to do with the Last Supper or something? I don't know why 13's supposed to be unlucky. But at any rate, if I ever build a skyscraper, I'm going to have 13 floors exactly just to freak people out. And the most expensive apartments will be on the 13th floor. How about we do that? Okay, let's go. Well, let's start with Trump. I tell you what, let's start with old Trumpy. Um, just a dynamic about Trump that I want to touch base on, and that is that he freaks out the liberal class, right? And I'm going to refer to the liberal class as the Democrats in the U.S. and people of their ideological alignment, both in the U.S. and throughout the West, right? Particular group of people, the liberal class in this environment are a technocratic class, right? There's an answer for everything. There's a fix for everything. You know, they are the morally superior group. They are the intellectually superior group. All of those things within the context of their group. That's what they believe, right? But there are some inherent traps in the local in the current iteration of liberalism, and Trump exploits the biggest one, not intentionally. Let's just say intuitively, right? And here's the deal. So what am I getting at? So recently, Trump said something about, yes, Christians should vote. Christians vote. Get out there and vote. And if you vote, it's important that you vote. And if you vote and we get things straight, then you're not going to have to vote again. That'll be it. Next time around, you won't have to vote, right? Okay. And the liberals, of course, did what the liberal class does. Oh my God, what has Trump said, right? They wanted, and there was two things going on. Number one, they didn't know how to interpret it. They had no idea how to interpret it, because it would be like somebody speaking to me in Chinese and I don't speak Chinese. They don't understand the language that Trump is speaking. Number two, the other part of it is they wanted to interpret it in a way that supported the arguments that they're making about Trump and why you shouldn't vote for Trump, right? So they already have a certain number of things that they're arguing. Don't vote for Trump. He's the next Hitler. He's going to, become a king. He's going to just, in a wipe of his hand, he's the most powerful man who ever lived. In a wipe of his hand, in the blink of an eye, in the wiggle of a nose, like Bewitched, he's going to do away with everything. The Constitution, which, let's face it, the U.S. government doesn't pay attention to that anyway. But if they did, he's going to do away with all of that, right? So, my God, Trump is horrible and scary, and he's an authoritarian, and he's the next Hitler. Putin, of course. Putin is 10 times worse than Hitler. We know that, 10 times worse than any of them. And Trump is 10 times worse than Putin. And, the whole, how that goes, right? So when Trump says, vote Christians, you're never going to have to vote like your life depending on whatever, and then you're never going to have to vote again, the liberal class are caught in two traps. Number one, trying to interpret it, which they're unable to do. Number two, additionally interpreting in a way that benefits them, that will help them win, right? So let's start here. They couldn't understand it for this particular reason. And a reason that regular people, more working class, working poor people tend to understand it. What Trump does is just runs off at the mouth. I'm going to use foul language. I don't do it often in my in my podcast, as it were, but I'm going to do it here to make a point. Okay. And that is, I like to refer to my dad for this reason. As I told people, he was a longshoreman, wore a hard hat. He worked in the cold. People know what kind of people work on the dock workers, right? They ain't soft guys. They're tough guys. They're old school guys, right? It's like you somebody saying my dad was a mechanic or he was a construction worker. We know the kinds of people. They're usually not highly educated. They're usually hard working. They get up early. When it's cold, they go outside. They scrape the ice off of their cars, whatever. You know what I mean? They're tough dudes, right? And they have a concept of communication that is far different than the liberal class. And it works something like this. And this is what my dad would say. You know the difference between a guy who talks, there's two kinds of people. There's a guy who talks shit. No, excuse me, a bullshitter and a shit talker, right? And what's the difference? A shit talker just runs off at the mouth. He just says anything. Yeah. You know, they're out on working on the docks and it's cold, and there's just guys that just yap you. Hey, you piece of shit! I'll do this to your wife. You know, guys all day long. You're in the longshoreman. Some guys telling you the sexual things that he would do to your wife. Literally, my dad would tell me. The guy's telling the sexual things. I'll do this and that. Another guy's, I'll kick your ass. Another guy's half drunk. I mean, these guys just talk shit all day. Things that, like, if somebody took them serious, they'd go over and punch the guy, right? But they just know that's what whoever, Joe Blow, he just talks shit all day long, right? Okay, there's nothing to it. They already know it. A shit talker just runs off at the mouth. There's nothing to it. Then there's the bullshitter. The bullshitter is the guy who said something about the guy's wife, but everybody knows that the guy is having trouble at home and he suspects his wife is fooling around on the side, right? So what's the difference? The bullshitter, there's always a little bit of truth to what he says. The shit talker just blah, anything. And then people just, oh God, you know. The bullshitter is the guy who might get in a fight because he'll say something and the guy, people are all like, oh shit, you shouldn't have went there. You know what I mean? Because there's a little bit of truth to it, right? So people on the street, most people on the street, your construction guy, your longshoreman, they know the difference. Your guy that works as a mechanic, your guy that hangs out at the bar. There's a guy sitting at the bar. He's got a drink. He's got a cigarette. He's smoking. He just talks shit all night long, right? And everybody knows that's old Joe. He just runs off at the mouth, right? Joe ain't going to get in a fight. Nobody pays any attention to Joe. Oh, there's Joe again talking shit. Joe, what are you drinking? Long Island iced tea. What? No, Joe ain't drinking a Long Island iced tea. Here's what Joe will it be? Give me another bourbon on the rocks. Another bourbon for Joe. He's you know what Joe is? He's like the jukebox in that bar. He's a background noise in the bar. People in the bar, hey, there's Joe. What's happening, Joe? He's half drunk again, and he's going to talk shit, right? And then the bullshitter's a guy that, you know, it was a little bit of truth to him. That's the guy that ends up getting a fight, that causes trouble, what have you, right? Okay, here's my point. The liberals don't get either one of those. They're technocrats. When someone says something, the liberal stops to think what they mean, to figure it out in the context of the current situation. What is this guy saying? What is the history of what he's saying? When the shit talkers talk shit, those of us who are regular people go, pah. Joe running off at the mouth. When the bullshitter says something, they go, "Man, Joe, better watch it. You can get punched. You keep talking that shit, Joe." Right? The liberal goes, either one of them. The liberal treats everybody the same, no matter what it is. So the person says, blah, blah, blah. The liberal goes, I must decipher what he means. Let me figure it out. Let me evaluate it for accuracy. Let me put it through a fact check, which the fact check simply means, does it align with the current narrative? Doesn't mean whether it's factual or not. It means we have a narrative. Remember when you hear this fact checker? Fact check means we have a current narrative, and I'm going to compare that statement to the current narrative. If it fits the current narrative, then it's factual. If it doesn't, and it's factual, we have to say something like it doesn't have the right context or something like that, right? So the liberal has to put it through his fact checker. Trump said, fill in the blank, right? Whereas the guy who's a longshoreman doesn't pay attention to it. Because you know what he knows? That Trump, the reason Trump is very attractive rhetorically to a lot of working class and working poor people is because he meanders seamlessly between the two. Sometimes he's just talking shit. Sometimes he's bullshitting, going after Joe or Kamala, right? And he's calling them names or making up a joke about them. Sleepy Joe, right? And there's a little bit of truth to it. Sleepy Joe is an attack on Joe, but it also implied that Joe was not quite there. You know, when you're sleepy, you're not quite there. You're not quite as sharp as normal. You're not quite where you need to be, right? That was the bullshitter's attack. That was Sleepy Joe. Is it a old school, childish kind of playground punch? Yes, it is. Deep down in that Sleepy Joe attack, there's some truth to it. Joe is old. Everybody knew old Joe was a little sleepy, right? That's Trump. He can go in and out. And so when Trump says something like, just vote Christians and you're never going to have to vote again, the liberal class goes, oh, what does he mean? Take notes, everybody. Run it through our fact checker. Let's run it through let's go and see what people think about it. Let's go to MSNBC. Let's have Rachel Maddow talk about it. Let's bring on a huge panel of people from Ivy League, from vine-covered Ivy League universities to discuss what Trump just said. Oh my God, he said it. What does that mean? That means that he's let's run it through our fact check. Well, our fact-checking narrative is Trump wants to overthrow the world and he wants to be the king and the emperor. Okay, so running through that fact check, it aligns perfectly right. There it is. He wants to be the king of the world. He wants to run everything. And there you go. And there you go. And to be quite frank, it works very well for people who are already not going to vote for Trump. What they constantly do is they constantly run things through filters and discuss things in the context of their very myopic crew, their myopic group, their myopic ideology. They can't understand how anybody sees the world different from them. And so they come up with an answer that within their group is great. So they can all look at each other and say, what does Trump mean? And they all get together and they all come up with what Trump means, and they all high five. Man, we really got that one right, didn't we? We all know what Trump means. It means what they already said. What they say last week? Trump's a dictator, an emperor. He wants to overthrow the world. Okay, Trump said X. What's that mean? Well, let's run it through our fact checker. Let's bring in some Ivy League minds. Let's bring in some Trump haters. Let's bring in some Republicans against Trump. Let's bring them all and see what it means. We'll run this filter through all of these groups. What does it mean, guys? Yeah, it means Trump's a dictator and emperor and wants to throw over the world. I do it. Isn't it coincidental that no matter what Trump says, they already have, this is the way it works here in liberal the technocracy. Once they come up with a narrative, there is a faux kind of process that you run through. Anything that happens, you run it through this process. Now, you've got a narrative. The narrative is X. Something happens. You run it through fact checkers. You run it through your people, your narrative minders. You run it through all of those. Remember, our narrative and our theory was X. You run it through everybody you can, and I'm guarantee you in the end, you'll come out with an answer. What will it be? It'll be X. It'll be X because it's all a fraud. This is all just simply to say we got on Trump there. Look, here's my point. What does it really mean? I don't know. How would I know? I'm not in Trump's mind. When Trump says you won't have to vote again, here's my guess. Based on my experience coming from a guy who wore a freaking hard hat and worked around people who ran their freaking mouth all day. Some of those guys, my dad even said, man, I think some of those guys run their mouths just to stay warm because it's cold and they figure they'll get some exercise running their yaps. He talk about guys, you know the type, they're working out on the ship, blah, blah. And there's a guy all day long. He's cursing people out from one person to the next. He's talking about your mama. He's just all day long talking shit. And my dad would say, this one guy, I'm going to go say his name. My dad would say, sometimes people would just say to him, will you ever shut up? And then he'd cuss that guy out and on he would go. There was no hope, right? Okay, here's my point from that perspective. Those of us who have a connection to those kind of working class people through our families, through our history, through our parents, maybe through us, we don't try to evaluate and interpret everything into a language that we can understand or that aligns with a narrative. Sometimes we just say, this guy's bullshit. I'm going to do this, that. We listen to Trump, and he's like, yeah, and we're like, it's Trump. It's Trump. That's the answer. Why do you think Trump said that? Because he's Trump. Hey, there's a fish swimming by. Wonder why that fish is swimming. It is the nature of fish to swim. The fish ain't swimming for. You see, I was out yesterday on down the Tucson River. I saw a bunch of dolphins. Oh, they're just a frolicking. You know what dolphins do? They frolic, right? They're frolicking all over creation. Then I look at those and say, I wonder why those dolphins are swimming in those particular patterns. And then a ship comes, a big old boat comes by, and you see a dolphin cock his tail and get on the ride the wake of the ship. Why is he doing that? Because he's a dolphin. It's his nature to do that. I guess it's fun. He likes to do it. It's a dolphin. Why not? Right? I saw dolphins out there. I saw rays flopping around. I saw you catch a little fish and you bring him up and you're like, ah, crap. You throw it back over, and sometimes it was too deep or whatever. He floats on the top. Guess what happens? You look, there's an osprey coming in. Whoop, he grabs that dead fish he's going to eat. That's why I don't worry about throwing a fish over there, because these birds are circling all along. As soon as they see a fish in the water flopping around, or they ain't going to make it, they're going to grab that fish. They got to eat too, right? It is the nature of these things. I could look at the Patuxent River as a system. Fish, birds, water, me, all those things, right? That's just what happens on the Patuxent River on a given day, right? Water flows through, wind blows. People who are regular, ordinary people who aren't members of the liberal class can just look at Trump, and we don't have to run things through a fact check. We don't have to run things through a narrative minder. We don't need to bring in a group of people from vine-covered universities. We can just, it's Trump. Trump likes to talk. He runs his yap. He grins. He says what he's going to say. He cracks a joke. He insults somebody. He gets out. He's at his Trump. That's why Trump at his rallies. That's why he thrives at his rallies. He's just bullshit and shit talking, right? He goes to his rally, he's leaning up there, and now up he goes. He's the guy on the end of the bar that's got a cigarette and a bourbon, taking it and just running off at the yap. It's Trump. So he is what he does. We don't need to interpret it. And the liberal class needs to interpret it. And it works well for the people that are already going to vote for them and already support them. The rest of us just look at them and yawn and go back. Oh, yeah, what is Trump's going to do? What do you think he means? I gotta drink my coffee. It's good in the morning. Get myself together. There you go. We don't want to hear that crap about Trump. We don't care. Why? Because ultimately the average schmuck is looking at it saying, what are you voting on? What Trump said, that he wants to be an emperor or whatever. And people are like, nah, man, I can't pay my rent. So people will vote. That's what the liberal class doesn't understand. Listen to Joe Biden. Did you to a speech by Joe Biden? Donald Trump talks crap, whatever. He just gets out there and talks, straight A+ bull crap, right? Joe Biden gets out there and gaslights us. He tells us the most wonderful economy that we've ever had, that we're not at war. He's happy to report that we're not at war. All these things, right? That if they were true, they'd be great, right? But to the liberal class, they are talking to the littles, and they come up with something to talk to the littles, to the nobodies, that the littles will want to hear, irrespective of their personal economic circumstances. Hey, everything's great, littles. And when the littles say, well, they don't feel so, well, shut up. What's wrong with you? Well, Trump doesn't do that. Trump has more of a connection to the littles, and the liberal class can't understand that. So they'll keep running what he says through his fact checkers. And he'll be, somebody says all of them talk crap. Yeah, it's just a different kind. Even though none of it's true, Trump's is more honest, believe it or not. Even though none of it's true, Trump's is more honest, because Trump is just a bullshitter. It's who he is. Trump doesn't need to write down, to bring together a bunch of people to write a speech for Joe Biden, so Joe Biden can tell us how the economy's great and all that kind of stuff. Look, Joe Biden didn't write that. His speech writers, Blinken, Sullivan, all of these people that think they're so smart get together to write a speech for Biden that's a flop. Trump don't need all of that. Trump ambles up he probably got nothing written down. He ambles up to the mic and he just starts running off at the yap, and whatever he says. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's the stupidest thing you've ever heard. Sometimes it's a combination of the two. Sometimes it's over the top warmongering. Sometimes it's over the top peace mongering. It doesn't matter to Trump because while they're trying to figure out what he said last week, he just ignores it and goes on to the next thing. And the fact of the matter is this: the people who are supporting Trump aren't really supporting Trump for what he says. They're supporting him for something different. So the liberal class doesn't understand that, and we'll keep watching it. All right, let's keep going. The liberal, I'll never forget, as I might have told you, might have heard it in other podcasts. I'll never forget this. I was at Harriet Fulbright, the wife of the Senator Fulbright, right? And she had a party at her house in D.C. I was there with friends, and one of my friends, guy, I love him like a brother, good guy, right? And he was saying, they were talking about, I haven't seen him quite a while, but they were talking about how to get the message across to conservatives, right? And I'm just sitting there watching, thinking, oh, this is going to be fun. And he says, if we just tell them the facts, all we got to do is give them the facts and we'll win. And I thought to myself, you really don't understand human nature, do you? Number one. Number two, based on what I've seen of fact checkers, the facts themselves are relative to and I think conservatives figured that out, and people who aren't conservatives, people figured that out. They realized that this concept of facts simply means statements that are relative to the current narrative, liberal narrative. That's it. That's a fact. It supports the current narrative, and if the narrative changes next week, then it ain't a fact anymore. But it was that mentality. We just give them the facts. That's not seeing people as humans. That's seeing people as points of data, right? That these are people sitting there and you're going to give them information and they're going to take the data, and based on the data you give them, they're going to move forward. They're not good, but as opposed to people who interpret their individual circumstances. All right, so that's the Trumpian thing. I wanted to just talk about that because I saw these liberals freaking out over the latest thing Trump said, which they'll do next week. He'll keep them hopping. He'll keep them bouncing. He'll say something over this week, the course of this week, and they'll freak out again, and he'll keep them bouncing, and he'll keep them, whatever, bounce it off the walls. Now let's go to Ukraine. All right. Well, let's not, because it's kind of dangerous there, but let's talk about Ukraine. Let's talk about the issue. What's going on there, right? Some interesting things going on here. And there's two tracks we can talk about Ukraine, right? Track one is the discussion of Ukraine, right? The neocon, the Ukraine, let's put it like this. Let's do it a different way. Let's talk about the Ukraine project first versus Ukraine, right? What is Ukraine, right? Ukraine is a land area. Ukraine is a group, I would argue at least at minimum, but two particular ideological groups that are clash historically. Ukraine is something in the real world. It's a land area which is constantly changing, and it's people in that land area who have conflicts. And now, when we go to Project Ukraine, what is that? That Project Ukraine is actually this. If I was to distill it down, it is the ruling elite of the U.S., right? Utilizing the conflicts in Ukraine, the historical conflicts in Ukraine, to transfer Ukraine into a political and military tool to attack Russia with. That's what it is, right? They went in there and they saw some historical conflicts. They saw a very volatile group, the Banderites, and they saw them as a valuable tool that could be used to go after Russia for any number of reasons, right? That's a whole nother podcast, but you guys are already very familiar with it, no doubt. So in the real world, both Ukraine, the country itself, as we would understand what a country is, with geographical boundaries, with historical peoples that are clashing, etc., and Project Ukraine are simultaneously collapsed because you can't separate one from the other. Now, the neocons have continually tried to separate one from the other, right? They've tried to turn Project Ukraine into a narrative. And the narrative is simple. It is this poor little country that's being attacked by its big neighbor. And it is a virtuous country, very, very virtuous. They like democracy and honesty, and they just want to do things right there. It's a good and democratic country who are trying to do the right things. And the Russians are evil, and the Russians don't like democracy. They don't want anything like that. What have we heard? Why'd Putin attack them? He attacked them because he wants to rebuild the Soviet Union. He attacked them because he hates democracy. He attacked them for no reason, completely unprovoked. Unprovoked. He just decided, I'm going to attack them, right? So there's numerous reasons why he attacked them according to the neocon narrative. But the bottom line is, as a result, we, being the good guys, must help Ukraine also being good guys to protect themselves from bad guys. This is just another example of the good guys versus the bad guys. And of course, we're always the good guys, right? The problem is this, and it always was this. They never had a plan, and they got into a big game that they didn't understand without a plan. It was an old game that they were going to play. They've done it before, utilize a country, weaponize a country to go after another country, weaponize a country to go after a region. That's all Israel is. Israel is, they took Palestine, they weaponized Palestine politically, they weaponized Palestine materially, so that they could destabilize and dominate the entire oil-rich Middle East region. Okay, that's an old game. And the plan here, destabilize Russia utilizing its next door neighbor. We're going to take this country, set it up, and it's going to be a nice little political tool, and we'll use it to destabilize the region of Europe. Look, they make a lot of money, and they are very comfortable in the power dynamic of chaos. So the Middle East turned into chaos, right? AFRICOM, Southcom in Latin America. What is it to turn the region into chaos? Well, Europe's not chaos, is it? Well, now it is, right? To deliberately turn the region of Europe into chaos. Look, think about this. They get countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia and all these other countries to buy untold hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars worth of weapons, right? That they really need to be spending on their people and other things. Now, that's the plan for Europe. Europe wasn't buying enough weapons. We destabilize the region. We turn it into chaos. Meanwhile, we go after Russia to destabilize Russia, but we also destabilize all of Europe. And we tell them, oh my gosh, the region is unstable because we destabilized it. And you got to buy lots of weapons. And boom, we've got the Middle East part too. Boom, we got the Middle East over here. Boom, we changed Europe into a chaotic war-torn region, and boy, we can make lots of money off of that too, and we can dominate the region too, and bring the Europeans completely to heel, bring them, put our exercise total and complete power over all of Europe. That's the game plan. Okay, well, that ain't working so well. They've destabilized the European countries in a way, but I suspect that the European countries are going to restabilize themselves because the people, it's going to take 5 to 10 years, but bit by bit, the people are going to vote in people. They're going to struggle to bring in people who are not aligned with the neocon Ukraine project. And the Ukraine project is crumbling for this reason, because it always depended on what happened on the ground. What happened, one of two ways. Number one, when they first started, of course, as you probably know, the plan was to get the war started and put all kinds of sanctions on Russia. And I think they really thought that Russia was going to launch some missile strikes and a small attacks or whatever on maybe a medium-sized war. They didn't expect Russia to go as far as it did. But whatever the case, they thought once this thing starts, we'll put all of these sanctions on Russia. And when we do that, Russia will collapse, and boom, we'll go take all of Russia and we'll split it all up and we'll have the spoils of plunder, right? The problem is Russia plays a different game. And so, as the old saying goes, beware the fury of a patient man, right? Russia went in there and, they played around a little bit. Can we straighten things out here? Can we punch them up a little bit? soften them up a little bit and get them to make a deal? And the answer was yes, they could. They softened them up a little bit. You had the Istanbul Agreement, and then the U.S. empire says that ain't what we're trying to do. Won't nix that, and we'll get Ukraine to keep on fighting for us. So the Russians then transferred into kick-ass mode. And what they did was this. They set up slowly but surely, chipping away. That's what the Russians do. That's how they fight. Chipping away. Trying to figure out what Ukraine was doing, adjusting. Oh, we need drones. Oh, we've got different kind of, the U.S. had the JDAM bombs, right? The JDAM, where you take an old bomb and you put some fins and stuff on it, a GPS guidance device, you drop the bomb, and it now is a glide bomb, and it can direct itself to a target, a preset target, right? And the Russians were like, hey, that's a good idea. They made their fab bombs. Right? They looked and they're like, hey, these drones work. Oh, we need anti-drone warfare. We need this, we need that. So the Russians slowly took their time. They advanced. They, it's like a fight, right? You're fighting somebody, you might advance. And then the person may, for one reason or another, you might back up. You may go to this side, you may go to that side, right? Remember something, if somebody ever attacks you, you're not defending any particular part of real estate. You don't have to stand your ground. If somebody attacked you, you can move over here, you can move over there, you can back up, you can run, you can flee if you think you can get away. You can do whatever, right? There's all kinds of options. And so what happened? The Russians, they were here, they were there, they're over here. You move your head, you make it hard to punch. Ever watch Mike Tyson? He's fighting. They call it the peekaboo style. He's out here, he's there, he's there. That's right. Boom. You're swinging, you're hitting there. The Russians fight. They're taking their time, slowly, slowly chipping away. And if things get kind of hot here, they're going to back up a little bit. You can have that space. Then they'll get themselves together and they'll come back and take it again. They don't mind. The Russians will take a town. That town's surrounded. They're taking too much heat. Back it up here. You can take that town. We'll come back later. They'll come back and take it later when it's more opportune and it works better for them and they're better able to defend it. They take a town, but there's some high hills that you're hitting them with artillery. They back up out of that town. They take the hills. Now they go back and take the town bit by bit by bit. It's a different way of thinking, but it's a long-term way of thinking, but it's effective. It's very effective in the long term. You're going to have to outgrit and outgrunt them. Slowly but surely. It's like a person who fights who's, in really good physical condition. The big guy's planning on punching him out. The little guy's going to wear him out. He's going to rope-a-dope him. He's going to take his time. He's going to keep punching and chipping until a big guy gets tired, and he's going to take him down. He's going to win that one. Or the big guy might collapse on his own because he's so big, he's so tired, he just falls out. The little guy runs away. He's in better physical condition, right? So what's happening? You notice that I said Ukraine crumbles. It's not that the Russians are, I put it this way, smashing it to pieces. In a way they are. But what they're doing is slowly but surely chipping away, increasing their advantages, increasing their technological advantages, increasing their industrial advantages, all of those things slowly but surely, so that not only do they defeat Ukraine, see what the Russians are doing is this, not only are they defeating Ukraine, as they defeat Ukraine, they're weakening their adversary, right? The more the West sends stuff in, the more they get to destroy it, the more they get to bring it home and study it, the more they get to find ways to defeat it, and the more the West is running out of stuff, right? They make the West commit more and more and more of their stuff. They blow it out. So now you've got countries that are mad. I'm ready to fight Russia. And then they call their military. Are we ready to fight Russia? Nah. Why? Well, we already sent all of our military stuff to Russia, and it's already been blown. We're pretty much out of tanks, out of planes, out of everything. Well, when can we fight Russia? 12 years, maybe, something like that. 12 years. If we stop sending stuff to get blown up, maybe 12 years. So the Russians are their advantage. The advantage that they have in Ukraine is not just an advantage in Ukraine. It's an overall advantage over NATO, a technological advantage. NATO's sending all of their stuff in, Storm Shadow, missiles, this kind of thing. So they get to study them. They get to learn how to defeat them, all of these kinds of things. So they are multiplying their advantages exponentially, right? So it's working for them. Meanwhile, that's why, in a way, let's face it, the length of this conflict has played into Russia's hands. Really, I mean, if you're Russia, I hate to say this, and I'm going to say this just, not certainly you don't want war to go on because war is dangerous and you're losing people, and that's horrible. But the length of the conflict is what it is. The nature of this conflict being long has greatly strengthened Russia. It strengthened them, as I've said, all of the ways militarily, but additionally diplomatically, because they played it very, very well diplomatically the whole time. What have the Russians said? We're always ready for a deal. We're always ready to talk anytime you want, but it's got to be reasonable. And what has happened with the West? What has happened with the proxies in Ukraine? Yes, here's what we want. We want maximalist everything. We want you. The way this ends is you give us everything we want. It's kind of the way the U.S. empire. It is neocon way of viewing making a deal. That's what it is. It is, let's make a deal. Okay, great, great, great. What did they say with North Korea? Hey, let's talk to North Korea. Okay, here's what we're going to do. North Korea, number one, you're going to give us everything we want. Completely disarm everything we want. And once you give us everything we could possibly want and then some, we're ready to talk. In other words, we got to win completely everything. And then after we've won everything and you have no leverage and you have nothing to bargain with, then we'll start bargaining. Once you disarm yourself and you have nothing to bargain with, you and I are standing there with guns pointing at each other, right? The old infamous Mexican standoff. Well, what are we going to do here? Neither of us wants to die. Tell you what we'll do. Let's come up with a deal. Fair enough. You drop your gun. Turn your back on me. I'll put the gun to the back of your head. I will cock back the hammer and then we'll start talking. Nobody's going to take that, right? So the Russians have taken their time. And right now, the Ukraine project is crumbling bit by bit. Economically, it's over. The Russians have demonstrated that old school economics rules the world, right? That old school, if you got a quarter, you got $1, and I got an ear of corn. That ear of corn is more valuable than the dollar because you can eat the ear of corn. You can't eat the dollar. We're on a desert island, and one guy's got a box of MREs, meals ready to eat, right? A box of them that'll last a month. And we got to hope, we're going to get rescued. You got $1 million. That box of MREs is much more valuable than the $1 million. In fact, the guy says, I'll give you $1 million for that box of MREs. And I'd say, no, thanks. You keep your $1 million. If we were back in the real world, it'd be valuable. But if we were back in America, it'd be valuable. But here on this desert island, the MREs are what it's all about because you got to eat. What Russia showed is they got MREs. They got gas, they got oil, they got nickel, they got wheat, they got things that people want. And you can't sanction those things out of existence. Sanctioning is the $1 million. Sanctioning is theoretical money, right? If you do that, if you spend money on this will happen to you. And all of these theoretical things that you can do with money in a financialized system, being sanctioned is scary and upsetting because, oh, you're screwed. But in the real world, you said to a country, you're sanctioned, you can't do business with Russia, and the country says, I understand that. But if I don't get wheat from them, I starve. If I don't get oil and gas from them, then I starve because all my industry goes out of business and we freeze to death. If I don't get the things that they need in the real world, I die. It's that $1 million on the desert island. If I don't get these calories from these meals ready to eat, I die. And that $1 million is of no value to me. Sure, is it a chance? Yeah, but I'd love to have the $1 million. Yeah, but I got to have that food. And in the end, what people woke up to was, well, wait a minute, Russia's got food and gas. And in reality, neoliberal financialized economy ain't going to save me from starvation and freezing to death. But wheat and gas will. And so the economic, the ground shaking, earth shaking realization that the world came to economically was, the economics have never changed since somebody decided to trade a basket of corn for some seashells and decided that the shells were going to be money, that the shells were going to represent that ear of corn. That's all they ever were, was theoretically representing the ear of corn. You got a bushel of corn. You got to have that corn. And so all of the sanctions washed ashore because people need corn and people need wheat. And that was, to me, if I say the biggest defeat of the East, it was the reminding of people. It was the awakening of people that when it comes down to it, hard commodities are what makes the world work, not financialized magical derivatives and asset-backed securities and things that we don't even credit default swaps. That ain't what it is. In the end, dude, you got to have some wheat, corn, and water and oil and gas. And additionally, the other big loss, I mean, not even talking about what's on the battlefield, the other big victory for Russia, and really I argue the global South, because they have commodities. It was a win for the global South because they have commodities, and the world once again learned the value of the commodities, and they were reminded the value of the commodities, and they were also reminded somebody's stealing their damn commodities, right? But the other part was industry versus deindustrialization. The US is deindustrialized. The West is deindustrialized. It was the way capitalism works, right? I can make more money if I go to the global South, the areas where labor is cheaper, and build my stuff there. Yes, you can. So that what do you have? You have more of that money. You have more of the things that represent wealth. When you go to the grocery store and you have your basket, right? The wealth is in the basket. When you slide that card, that money that pays for that represents the wealth. The wealth is you can't eat that. The wealth is in the card. So what people were reintroduced to is something that people knew many thousands of years ago. We gotta eat. We gotta stay warm. We gotta have clothes. We gotta have this and that, right? And I'll trade you for this and that with something. I'll trade you for that with something that represents that. Don't do you no good. You can't eat that. So once the war started and the West said, okay, we got you now. Why? Remember this, we're going to send $100 billion to Ukraine. And everybody was like, "Ooh, man, $100 billion. That's going to make a difference." You can't stuff $100 billion down the barrel of a howitzer and fire it at the enemy. You got to have gunpowder. You got to have shells. So they came up with, here's $100 billion. All right, what are we going to do with that? Okay, buy some shells. All right, where's the shells? We don't have them. Okay, make me some. I'll give you $100 billion. We don't have the facilities necessary to make them. We're running short on gunpowder. We don't have the people we need. Interesting. To the Russians? Yeah. To the Chinese? Yeah. People started to realize that the countries that had industrial capacity and commodities were the most powerful countries on earth. If you got industrial capacity, right? And not just capacity. The US has industrial capacity, but it doesn't have industrial strength. It doesn't have material industrial strength. The US could have industrial strength. It's got the energy that it needs. It's got the people, although we're not educating our people well, so we don't have the educated workforce that a Russia and China has right now, many other countries. But the bottom line, it has the industrial capacity in a lot of ways, with the exception of having the people to man the industry. But that could be fixed, right? But not the material industrial strength at this time. I put it like this: with the U.S., with the West, its industrial potential. It was once there, now it's gone. So the potential is there, but based on the system that we have now, the potential can't be realized because all of the money is made. We've changed our economy into an economy of financialized capitalism. So you can't realize the potential for physical industry when the people who are making all the money are making it off of magic, off of black magic, green magic, one might argue. But at any rate, so where we are is this: as the Russians take their time and defeat their enemy town by town, village by village, kilometer by kilometer, right? All their other advantages expand exponentially. And the US is then exposed, and the West is exposed. Militarily, it's exposed that it's got nothing but nuclear weapons. That's why the US is sending doing all this nuclear stuff. We'll send nuclear weapons to Germany. We'll send nuclear weapons here, nuclear weapons there. Why? Because they don't have anything else. That's all they have. They don't have the ground war capacity that it takes really to be an empire. You got to have capacity on the ground when it comes down to it. They're used to stand back, firing missiles from a distance, blowing something up, hoping that the people capitulate. And what people have learned is this: just let them fire them till they're done, or attack them and don't let them fire them. But the bottom line is that when it comes down to it, they can't put the people on the ground to win. They can't do that. Israel's talking about attacking Lebanon. What they're really saying is, we'll fire missiles from a distance, we'll bomb from the sky, but we can't send troops in to attack Lebanon because they'll be decimated. You can't, but here's the bottom line: you can't do big arrow offensives with big lines of troops and big lines of military hardware anymore, because it'll be bashed to pieces by standoff weaponry. Even Israel can't do that. All Israel can do when they say the war with Lebanon is they can launch standoff attacks, they can launch attacks with planes, but they can't send the troops in ever. So what can you take? What can you take? Can you take land and hold it if you don't send the troops in? Bottom line is, Russia has the capacity to maintain and support a ground military presence, which means they can win wars. And if you can't do that, you can't. And that's another way that not only is Ukraine crumbling, the whole narrative of the Ukraine project is falling apart, because ultimately you can weaponize Ukraine, but you can't use it as a political tool and a military tool against Russia, because eventually the Russians are going to come in and smash your tool. They're going to break your tool, right? They're going to take it from you. They're going to break it in half. You know, it's kind of like the superhero movie where you see some guy point a gun at Superman, and Superman takes the gun and just crushes it in his hand and throws all the pieces apart. Your weapon was no good to this guy. It was no good against this guy. And so now the weapon of Ukraine is not any good. It's being the Russians are slowly but surely breaking it, but they have a broader plan. At the same time they're doing that, they're now saying we're going to not only extricate ourselves from the Western controlled economic infrastructure, we're going to work with our allies to build an alternative economic infrastructure so that the U.S. empire can no longer use that economic infrastructure as a political tool to dominate the global South, to dominate the world. The time will come when some of the so-called allies of the United States will leave the U.S. as the Western global structure and go into the new global South, whatever you want to call it, global majority structure, because they can do that and they don't have to be dominated and controlled by the U.S. empire. The SWIFT system. The SWIFT system is not a system for transferring money between countries. The SWIFT system is a system for U.S. economic domination over its adversaries, or anyone that it chooses to abuse, control, attack, whatever. It's just an alternative military way. You can attack someone militarily, kinetically, or you can attack them diplomatically, or you can attack them economically. This is just a way. It's an economic military tool, as it were, for attacking its adversaries and for attacking countries that try to have independence and sovereignty, so you can control them. And as I said, bit by bit, as the Russians crumble away, chunk away at Ukraine and cause it to crumble bit by bit, the entire system of U.S. imperial domination is going down with it. It's interesting because both inside and outside of Russia, of Ukraine, inside of Ukraine, the system of U.S. domination is going down materially and kinetically, bit by bit. Not just in that the Ukrainian military is being defeated, but in that U.S. imperial military technology is being defeated and exposed. The U.S. System of neoliberal capitalism is also being exposed, because now people are saying, wait a minute, people are really saying that those tanks, those planes, those missiles, they were only built to make a profit. They weren't built to be used on the battlefield. That's not a missile. That's a product. A missile would be will be designed to blow up your enemy for as least for as cheaply as possible. Build a missile What do we need? We need a good missile that works. What do we need? As many missiles as we can. So if I build a missile that costs $10,000, and for a million, I can get 100 of those missiles. But what happens if I build a missile that costs $2 million? I'll make the same missile, but I'm going to get a lot more money. And so it exposed that the military power of the US empire is weakened by its economic system that says everything has to be for profit all the time. Therefore, when you make military hardware, rather than make it to defend, rather than make it to attack, it's nothing but another product to make money. It's like the food, right? Hey, there's a box of whatever it is to eat, microwavable in minutes. You look on the back and you read the ingredients. You're like, holy mother of God, this stuff's going to kill me if I take a bite of it. It wasn't made for you to eat. It was made to make a profit. It is a product. There's a difference between food and a product. There's a difference between a missile and a product. A product is made to make money. And now, in the neoliberal capital system, everything is made for a product, which means it doesn't have to be effective or particularly efficient for its use, as long as it makes a lot of money. That was also exposed on the battlefield. It was also exposed in the Red Sea. The people of Yemen, we're going to fire a $10,000 drone at you, and you're going to use a $2 million missile. There we go. So whose economic system works better? The one that can make you spend $2 million where they spend 10,000? Does yours work better than those? In the long run, it ain't going to work out for you. And people saw that. And I believe this. A lot of our adversaries realized something. That's the key to taking them out. Look what Iran did. Iran, when they did their little thing on kind of assault on Israel, they used that. They used that military strategy. We're going to fire lots and lots of cheap drones, lots of them. What the hell? A whole swarm of cheap drones come at you, and then the more expensive missiles will just fire 5 or 6 of them. Everyone hits their mark. Why? Because you're overwhelmed with drones. Why? Because your economic system is reflected in your military capacity and capability. And so really, what did Iran do? They defeated the US's economic system. They defeated our economic system. They said your economic system can't produce as much as we can produce as cheaply. So guess what? We'll do what we can do. We'll produce the cheap stuff, and the more expensive stuff, we only got to throw a few of them at you. And if you don't stop the cheap stuff, that's going to blow the hell out of you anyway. And we'll spend, we don't care if you knock out 80, 90% of it. It doesn't matter. That's what it's sent at you for. And if the 10% gets through, it's going to blow the hell out of you anyway. Their system was, our economic system of neoliberal capitalism was defeated. And now, bit by bit in Russia, the longer the Ukraine conflict goes on, the bigger the defeat for U.S. imperialism, bottom line. And now they don't know what to do because the Ukraine, and now we'll go to this. The Ukraine project, Neocons fix the world. Why did I say Neocons fix the world? Because the Ukraine project was about the Neocons fixing the world, right? The world is broken as far as they're concerned. They're supposed to dominate the world. They're supposed to be in charge. They're supposed to be able to go to any country they want, decide who's in charge, decide who's not in charge, put a government in charge, then give them some gigantic loans. See, this is the way it goes. Here's country X, a country in Africa. You go in and you make sure the government that's in charge is your puppets. Right? You then say to your puppets, we want to do a $10 billion loan to your poor little country. Yeah, the country's growing on its own, but and you say, and you can build all these kinds of things. And they say, oh, we don't want to do that. And you say, well, hey, if you don't, I'll kill you. And I overthrow the government to put you in. So guess what? Not only that, all of the people in your country, I mean, in your government are going to get, 10 million, 20 million each. We're in the billions. How about this? 20 million for each. So 1 billion or 500 million will be divided amongst the people in your government that we put in power. Okay. The rest of it, we're going to use to build like dams and stuff like that. But our companies are going to come over from the West. They're going to build them and we're going to get all the money in, so we're going to give you X amount of a loan for 3 billion. 500 million goes in your pockets in corruption. The other 2.5 billion, we're going to send our companies over to get all of it. Then when it's all said and done, we'll have the money, you'll have the money, the people of your country will be in debt. And then we'll say, look, we want your ports, we want your mines, we want all of these things to take from you so that because you can't pay the debt, and you'll always pay us any money you make. You'll always constantly be paying on that debt forever. So that's the way it works, and your country stays impoverished forever. And then we can just say, what when our people say, why is that African country poor? You can say because they're intellectually inferior to us and culturally inferior to us. Not that we robbed them and we set them up and we took everything that we could, right? So that's the plan. Along comes Russia and China, and they're doing deals with these people that cut us out, and we don't like that. So what do we have to do? We got to fix the world. We got to reimagine a world where we're in charge of everything, and we go back to the good old days, right? Back when things were great for us. It ain't working. It ain't working. They can't fix the world. You can't change the world. You know, you can't empty the Pacific Ocean with a teaspoon or a fork, right? And you can't go to a world that's in rapid change and suddenly halt that and reverse that change. That's what they want to do. It's rapidly changing. People are learning things. People are getting educated of what's happening to them. People are feeling the pain of neoliberal capitalism stomping them into the ground, and they've had enough. And now the neocons got to fix it because it ain't working. Meanwhile, they got a problem at home. At home, the people have had enough because neoliberal capitalism not only doesn't work for the global South because you're robbing them, right? What imperialism, what the US does, not only does it work for these other countries because you're robbing them, not only does it not work for Russia and China and Iran and India, the emerging countries, because you're trying to keep them from emerging, it doesn't even work for your people at home. So we have the neocons, the US ruling elite, saying we got to contain Russia and China because they're giving countries alternatives to our IMF World Bank loans that leave them in debt forever. Kind of what we're doing to our students when it comes to student loans. Same principle. What is a debt? It's a claim on future earnings, right? So when you put a country in debt, you have a claim on its future earnings. When you put your kids go through school and they have a student loan, you have a claim on their future earnings. You've taken, before they even go to work, you've taken all the money from their job for the next, I don't know how many years, for many of them for their lives. You've just taken all of the money that they're going to have. And the cost of everything's going through the roof. So the kid comes out of college, and even if he didn't go to college and have student loans, he couldn't afford an apartment or a house or a car. He can't afford all those things. But now, on top of that, he's paying for student loans. So if the prices hadn't gone down, he couldn't pay them. So this doesn't work for the people at home. So now what do you have to do? In the same way that you have to fix the world, you have to contain Russia, you have to contain China, you have to additionally contain the elements at home that are sick of the same thing that the people in Africa and Latin America are sick of. Simple as that. So you've got this ruling an elite in America that's what Americans don't understand. In the same way they're trying to contain Russia, they're trying to contain China, contain Iran, contain India, contain everybody, they're doing a pretty good job of containing the EU. The elements that are saying we don't like that and we're going to fight back and we're going to create a new economic infrastructure and the SCO and BRICS and all that kinds of stuff, that at home the exact same dynamic is going on. And they're trying to fix that. So what's going on back here? There are people saying, I want a third party. And what you see, notwithstanding any evaluation of the policies of RFK Jr. arose. And so people are like, oh, there's something different. Let's look at that, right? And RFK Jr., he has when it comes to the Gaza, he's going with the ruling elite. But when it comes to other things, he is different. He has a different worldview. When it comes to Gaza, I think RFK Jr. knows one thing. If he don't go along with the ruling elite, he will join his father and uncle. Believe you me, his options are to do, when it comes to vaccines and all these other things, he can question that stuff. If he questions Israel, he will go the way of RFK and JFK. And I think he knows it. If he didn't, all he had to do was watch what happened with Trump recently with bullets flying over his head, right? Okay. Jill Stein. More and more people are saying, I'm going to vote for Jill Stein. People are looking for other options. And what are they doing now? They're to contain them. They're doing things with the voting system in the primaries. They basically, the Democratic Party didn't have any primaries. They did away with primaries completely, no primaries whatsoever. A number of states, even though uh, RFK Jr., Marianne Williamson, and Dean Smith were all running in the Democratic primary. A number of states said, we're not going to put their name on it. We're just going to have Biden's name on it. Nope, nope, nope. So they had non-existent primaries. They chose Biden. They knew they were going to have to get rid of him. And so they had non-existent primaries, so that once that was done, that all that was over, and they finally had to get rid of a Biden, there wouldn't be anybody in second place. There wouldn't be anybody in there claiming that they had to get out. That they had, excuse me, there wouldn't be anybody there claiming that I'm in second place, so I should be the nominee, right? If RFK Jr. had stayed in, he'd have a claim, wouldn't he? He'd have a claim. But now, when you knew RFK Jr. was done, when he hired when Kucinich left, and he brought in a former CIA analyst, a former CIA, really, RFK Jr.'s campaign manager is former CIA. What do you think that means? Once they were able to do that, it was it for RFK Jr. Once they did that, it was all over for him. So the truth of the matter is, what does that mean? It's not about RFK Jr. It's about this. The people at home are looking for something different. And sooner or later, they're going to find it. May not be there now, but sooner or later, they're going to find it. So along comes Trump. He freaks out the liberal class. And there are people saying, I'm going to vote for Trump, who wouldn't normally vote for Trump. Not because and the liberal class doesn't even understand that. There are people that are going to vote for Trump for various reasons. Number one, there are people that are just pissed at the system. I'll fix them. How are you going to how is the fact checker, right? We did a fact check on Trump's speech and found out that he said things out of context. How is a person who's just pissed at the liberal elite, pissed at the system, and they're voting for Trump because they hate the system, how is fact checking finding that Trump used something out of context going to change that person's mind? It ain't. How's the person who's voting for Trump because they say, well, Trump speaks my language and understands my language and you don't liberally lead? How's fact checking for consistency going to change that? It ain't. What they don't even understand that what they're doing works well in their circles, but it ain't containing nobody. They're trying to contain any and everything down. They're trying to create in their inside and outside of their country what they're the same thing. Think about all this business about a so-called election interfering. Okay. There was a bomb or something happened with some trains in Paris where some trains stopped, right? And there was some kind of a possible terrorist attack, a potential terrorist attack, whatever the hell. I don't know what it was. You probably heard of it, trains in Paris. And what's the first thing that Israel did? It was Iran. It was Iran. It was Iran. It was Iran. Why? Because they hate Iran and everything was Iran, right? What happened here? Somebody takes a swipe at Trump, right? What does the U.S. empire say? It was Iran. It was Iran took a swipe. They do the same thing inside as outside. If you notice, if you want to evaluate how the U.S. think about all this misinformation crap, right? Oh, there's lies and misinformation online. And what do they do around the world? They send these NGOs in, they go into different countries, and they try to control the narrative there to get who they want to win. And then they come here and they lie to American people. There's one game, and the game is containment, containing elements outside of the U.S. empire, which they don't think anything's outside of the U.S. empire, that pushes back against U.S. domination, against the domination of the U.S. ruling elite and the British and imperialist ruling elite, right? And what do they do here? Same thing here. That's all they're trying to do. There are people here that says, and here's what's going on here. There are people in America who say, well, there is a discussion of democracy and a discussion of freedom and a discussion. We want that. We have an expectation of that, even though little do they know they never really had it, but that's not important. You can aspire. Democracy can be something you aspire to. Freedom, rights, things can be things that you aspire to. Here, the ruling elite don't see rights and freedoms. They see privileges, and they see that they have a right to grant those privileges or stop those privileges anytime they want. We can grant them. We can give you the privileges. We can deny you the privileges. And right now, what they're doing is when you say, well, I have the free speech, and they're like, well, that's a privilege. And when it comes to being online, if you're utilizing that privilege in a way that does not work for our containment policies, then we're going to revoke the privilege. And so now you have an argument. You have people saying that's a right, and you have the ruling elite saying not only is it not a right, it's a privilege, and I don't care if you think it's a right or not. We have the means to suppress that privilege. So guess what? Go on YouTube. Boom, we'll shut you down. Go on Twitter. Go on whatever. We'll shut you down. And then along comes some various elements of power, such as, let's say, an Elon Musk. And Elon Musk will argue that Twitter is free speech. And the neocons' position is it's a social media outlet. And that's one of the things that we use for our machinations, for our containment strategy in both inside and outside of the United States. And you ain't taking it from us. So now, in a way, Elon Musk is very, very valuable for the neocons. He is for this reason. He can have a platform that is loaded with chock full of neocon containment strategy, right? He's got this woman in charge who, she's misinformation, right? She's throwing people on. They're doing the same things they've always done, maybe on a little level, a lower level. You know what I mean? They don't have it cranked up all the way, but they got it there still. And they're, as needed, they use it, shadow banning, all those things. But what the great value of Elon Musk is that he can convince people that they still have a First Amendment rights on one platform. Well, we may not be able to do it on these others, but we sure can on Twitter. Well, you can't do it on Twitter there either. But it's important to the neocon strategy. It's important to the machine to still have this outlet for people so they can still believe that they have some free speech, that somebody's battling for free speech for them, the richest man in the world. How about that? And that they've got some level of free speech, so that when people people get shadow banned and they face the same things on Twitter that they face everywhere else, maybe on a little bit lower volume, they can still convince themselves that they got free speech on Twitter, even though that's not what free speech is. Either you got it or you don't. If YouTube, 99% of the stuff you do is going to be shadow banned, and you go to X and it's 50%, that ain't free speech. But that's as good as you're going to get. And they can teach you that what you got is good enough. That's more than you can expect. 50% of what you deserve is more than you could possibly expect. So it's very valuable for Elon Musk to convince people that X is free speech, but because they're not really getting what it is that they deserve. Just like, I'll put it like this, in the same way that a Bernie Sanders or AOC and people like that are very, very valuable to the Democratic Party. Why is that? Because there ain't no, people use left now, that left has been redefined, right? Before, left meant that you were anti-war, that you were anti-establishment, you were pro-trade union, you were against the machine, you were very suspect of corporations. That was left, right? Now, what the Democratic Party has been able to do is say you can be the opposite of all of those things. You can hate trade unions. You can love corporations. You can be pro-war. All the things that the traditional left has always believed in, you can be the opposite of all of those. But as long as you got a rainbow flag and a Black Lives Matters mask on, you're walking around with some rainbow, red, white, and blue rainbow flag that shows that you're pro whatever LGBTQ stuff or Black Lives Matter, so you can pretend as though you're in favor of rights for Black people of color or something. And as long as you very happy that every stinking chewing gum advertisement has a Black person, a white person, a Muslim person, an Asian person, a gay couple, blah, blah, blah. See, as long as you can accept that the appearance of fairness, right? The appearance that they can give you symbolic things, as long as you're willing to accept that that's left, you're good now. You got a left. All you got to do is get a Black Lives Matter mask and wear that while you're riding in your convertible with nobody else but you, and a sticker on the back that's a rainbow flag that says I support rights for marriage for everybody. You those outward displays, Remember, not whether you do in your own heart or whether you believe everybody should be treated fairly, these outward displays that you go along with the machine. Now you're left. So get what does Bernie Sanders and AOC do? They vote for war, they support genocide, they do all of these things that are not traditional left. But they're like, we're for people of color, women of color, and people gay, trans, blah, blah, blah. They go along with that. And now they're legitimate left in the new context of left. So in the same way that what's his name? In the same way that Elon Musk gives you something that ain't free speech, and he's able to convince you that you have free speech when you're still being shadow banned and people are being thrown off X and all of these other things. Bernie Sanders, AOC, etc., can still convince people that the Democratic Party has a left flank. There are the lefties over there. There's still room for you. It's possible that you lefties may be able to take over the Democratic Party because there is a lefty element in the Democratic Party still there. As hard as small as it is, they're there and they're powerful and they can work with them and change the Democratic. It's bull crap. In fact, that's their job, to give you false hope. That's Elon Musk's job, to give you false hope. To take away the mentality of those that say we need a revolutionary change. They're reformers. Remember, when you talk about politics, people that say they're going to change, reform. Reform means we've got a system that's fine, a few little lumps, we need to tweak it and change it. We need to reform the system. Revolution, the system is fundamentally working, not broke. Remember, a working system is not what needs to, a broke system is not what needs to be. People aren't going to argue to reform a broke system. They're going to just say the system's broke. This system works great. It takes money out of the hands of the working class and concentrates it into the hands of a few rich people. Goes to the corporations, goes to the people that own stock, etc. Right? The system works well. Revolution says, people who believe a revolutionary change, they're saying the system don't work. The system works great. And it's a bad system because it only works for a few people and it hurts everybody else. So it's reform versus revolution. The fake left flank and in the Democratic Party is to say you should only push for reform because there's still a good element in this system, in this party, that can straighten things out. So it's okay for you. Elon Musk, hey, look, I still got a platform with free speech, so let's not try to do a revolutionary change in social media, First Amendment, things of that nature. We don't need any legal changes. Everything's fine because, YouTube and Facebook, they're all gone. Instagram, done. But there's still one here left, just enough to give you hope. And there's not even one here left. They always, remember this if you don't remember anything. They always want to give you hope where there isn't any. That's their game plan, is to give you some hope, because they know, what did Obama say? Hope and change. They want to give you hope that things are going to change, hope that you can change a system when there ain't no hope. Look, there was a great movie called The Last Starfighter, and in The Last Starfighter, in that movie, I'll never forget, there was this big Death Star looking ship. And the helmsman looked at the captain and the captain, the helm's not responding, and we're caught in the planet's gravitational pull. We're being sucked into the planet. What are we going to do? What do we do? And the captain looked at him, and he had a little monocle. He pulled it down. He says, we die. Come on. What do you want the man to say? Your ship is going to be sucked into the planet. It's going to be blown to smithereens. He didn't give him hope because there was no hope. He was honest with him. He was a captain. That was his job. And that's my job here. Yeah, hope. Get out of here with your hope and change. No. Beware of Elon Musk. He's here to give you hope. First Amendment hope. The ruling elite do not ever want you to have freedom of speech. You got freedom of speech until you say something that people actually hear, that exposes them. Look, as long as YouTube was full of puppies and kittens and people fixing a outboard motor engine, showing you how to change the element in your hot water heater, it was fine. But once people started saying, hey, I think you're being had, that's when all of the fact checkers came out. because you had free speech to talk about puppies and hot water heaters. You don't have free speech to say the system's lying to you. The system's cheating you. The system's doing you wrong. No, you don't have free speech to say that, which means you don't have it. But there's Elon Musk to nudge you. Hey, man, you got free speech over here. Come on, get out of here. How can you have it one place? And how can you have it when he's got some anti-free misinformation, disinformation czar running the damn thing as a CEO? Don't be a fool. Okay, well, at any rate, guys, that's it. I've yapped for all morning, and the neocons are trying to fix the world. Both the last part, just remember this. Just remember this. They're trying to do the same thing outside of the imperial structure of the U.S. contiguous states as they are inside. Everything they're doing out there, they're doing in there. Watch what they do out there and then look in here, and you will always see it aligned with things that they're doing here. Thanks a lot, everybody. Don't forget, I'm out of here. Share this on all your social media platforms, of course. Also, you can see everything down the bottom. Buy me a coffee, PayPal, Cash App. If you can contribute to the channel, wonderful. If you can't, don't worry about it. Just share this on all your social. Use your money to feed your family. Use your money to take care of yourself. If you can spare a few bucks for the channel, that's great. If you can't, I thank you very much for listening. Again, share this on all your social media platforms. Peace. I'm out.